A sunny day illuminated Peppa Pig's house, filling it with familiar laughter. Peppa and George played in their room, where a bunk bed stood against the wall. George below, Peppa above. Mummy Pig cooked in the kitchen, and Daddy Pig read the newspaper in the living room. Everything was as usual, but a slight, almost imperceptible tension hung in the air. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Susie Sheep stood on the doorstep, but her gaze was unusually empty and her movements stiff. She didn't smile as always and didn't jump with joy. Susie Sheep entered, her steps heavy, her gaze fixed on emptiness. Mummy Pig and Daddy Pig exchanged worried glances. Susie slowly approached George, her shadow looming over him. George felt a chill. His toys fell from his hands. Suddenly, Susie Sheep grabbed George, her grip strong and unexpected. George cried out in fright. Peppa froze. Mummy Pig and Daddy Pig rushed to them, but it was too late. Susie disappeared with George, leaving only an ominous silence. Peppa cried, tears streaming down her cheeks. Mummy Pig hugged her, trying to comfort her. Daddy Pig searched the room, looking for any clue. The air was filled with the smell of fear and despair. Suddenly, a shadow resembling a spider appeared on the wall. It was Spider-Man, his suit dark and ominous. He looked at Peppa, his eyes glowing in the darkness. Peppa felt hope, but also fear. Spider-Man pointed to the window, his gesture decisive. Peppa understood she had to follow him. Mummy Pig and Daddy Pig nodded, their faces pale. They set off into the unknown. They walked through a dark forest. The trees seemed alive, their branches reaching out to them. The sounds of the forest were frightening. Every rustle made them jump. Peppa held her mother's hand tightly. Ahead, an old abandoned hut appeared, its windows broken, its door creaking in the wind. Strange sounds like growling came from inside. Spider-Man stopped, his body tensed. Inside the hut, it was dark and cold. George's broken toys lay on the floor. Venom sat in the corner, his eyes burning red. He held George, who was unconscious. Peppa screamed. Spider-Man lunged at Venom. A fight began. Venom was strong, but Spider-Man was agile. Mummy Pig and Daddy Pig tried to help George. The battle was brutal and intense. Spider-Man defeated Venom, his body crumbling into dust. George was saved, but he was scared. Peppa hugged him, her tears now tears of joy. They returned home, but they would never forget that day. Evil can hide behind any door, but good will always prevail. The Lost Peppa Pig episode that never aired. A sunny day illuminated Peppa Pig's house, filling it with familiar laughter. Peppa and George played in their room, where a bunk bed stood against the wall. George below, Peppa above. Mummy Pig cooked in the kitchen, and Daddy Pig read the newspaper in the living room. Everything was as usual, but a slight, almost imperceptible tension hung in the air. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Susie Sheep stood on the doorstep, but her gaze was unusually empty, and her movements stiff. She didn't smile as always, nor did she jump with joy. Peppa, George, Mummy Pig, and Daddy Pig went for a picnic by the lake. The water was dark and still, reflecting the gloomy sky. They spread their blanket, but the air was heavy, foreshadowing something ominous. In the distance, an old, abandoned boat was visible, its outline appearing sinister. George pointed at the boat, his eyes filled with curiosity and fear. Peppa felt a chill, but curiosity prevailed. They approached closer. The boat creaked in the wind. Something stirred inside the boat, making strange sounds. Mummy Pig and Daddy Pig felt uneasy. Suddenly, Spider-Man leaped out of the boat, his suit torn, his gaze full of terror. Venom followed him, his black mass pulsating, absorbing the light. Venom extended tentacles towards Peppa, her heart frozen with fear. Spider-Man stood in defense, but Venom was too strong. The boat began to sway, threatening to engulf everyone. The pig family rushed to flee, escaping the horror. They ran without looking back until the boat disappeared from sight. At home, they couldn't sleep for a long time, remembering the terrifying encounter. The lesson was learned: not all adventures end well. Lost episode of Peppa Pig that never aired. The sunny day illuminated Peppa Pig's house, but shadows were gathering. Daddy Pig read the newspaper, his eyes scanning the news. Mummy Pig cooked, her movements tense. Peppa and George played in their room, the bunk bed against the wall, George below, Peppa above. Suddenly, a strange sound came from the street, making everyone freeze. The sound was like a whisper, but it penetrated the depths of the soul. Daddy Pig slowly approached the window, his face pale. A shadow flickered outside, too large for an ordinary day. Mummy Pig hugged George tightly, her heart pounding. Peppa felt a chill, piercing her to the bone. The shadow drew closer, and it became clear that it was something alive, dark, and menacing. It moved silently, like a ghost, but its presence was undeniable. Everyone held their breath, awaiting the inevitable. The creature stopped directly in front of the house, its silhouette blocking the sun. There was nothing in its eyes but emptiness and ancient evil. It raised its hand, and the house trembled at its touch. Peppa closed her eyes, wishing it was just a bad dream, but the nightmare was just beginning, and no one knew what the next moment would bring. The lost Peppa Pig episode that never aired. Peppa Pig's house was enveloped in an unusual silence. Gloomy shadows danced on the walls, creating ominous patterns. Peppa and George played in their room, where a bunk bed stood against the wall, George on the bottom, Peppa on top. Suddenly, a strange, distorted sound emanated from the old speakers. Mummy Pig and Daddy Pig froze, listening to the growing noise. The sound grew louder, penetrating every room of the house. The speakers began to glow with an eerie red light. Peppa and George felt an inexplicable fear. The speakers pulsed, emitting a piercing wail. The pig family watched the speakers in horror. Suddenly, the speakers exploded, leaving only silence. The pig family remained in shock, realizing what had happened. The silence was deafening, but now it seemed even more ominous. The sunny day illuminated Peppa Pig's house, filling it with familiar laughter. Peppa and George played in their room, where a bunk bed stood against the wall, George below, Peppa above. Mummy Pig cooked in the kitchen, and Daddy Pig read the newspaper in the living room. Everything was as usual, but a slight, barely perceptible tension hung in the air. Suddenly, a strange image flickered on the TV screen. Peppa and George froze, their eyes wide with horror. Something dark, ominous moved through the city. It was looking for something, and that something was very close. Daddy Pig felt uneasy, putting down his newspaper. Mummy Pig froze by the stove, listening. The ominous shadow approached their house. The knock on the door repeated, but now it was louder, more insistent. Peppa and George hid under the bed, trembling with fear. The shadow seeped through the cracks, filling the room. It was looking for them, and they knew it. Their hearts pounded like drums. The shadow approached the bed, its outlines becoming clearer. It was something terrible with sharp claws and burning eyes. It stretched its tentacles towards them. Mummy Pig and Daddy Pig rushed to protect their children. They tried to scare away the shadow, but it was too strong. Its tentacles wrapped around them. The shadow consumed them, leaving only emptiness. Peppa and George were left alone. Their world collapsed. They cried, but their tears were silent. Suddenly, a bright light illuminated the room. A hero appeared in red and blue. He was strong and fearless. He came to save them. The hero fought the shadow, his movements swift and precise. The shadow retreated, its power weakening. Hope returned to the children's hearts. The shadow disappeared, leaving only a cold trail. The hero smiled, his eyes shining with kindness. He saved them, and they were grateful. Peppa and George hugged the hero, their fear gone. They understood that even in the darkest moments, there is hope. It is important to be brave. A sunny day at Peppa Pig's house suddenly darkened as clouds covered the sky. Peppa was playing in her room with her favorite doll, but something felt wrong. Strange shadows flickered outside the window. A soft knock echoed at the door, like someone scratching with claws. At the doorstep stood a large white rabbit in a pink jumpsuit with a triangular mask on its face. Its eyes glowed red through the mask's slits. The rabbit extended a bright postcard to Peppa showing children's games. The postcard depicted swings, slides, and carousels, but something about these drawings seemed sinister. The colors were too bright and the shadows too dark. Peppa took the postcard with trembling hooves and read the invitation to fun games for children. The rabbit nodded and vanished as suddenly as it appeared, leaving only the smell of damp earth and withered flowers. Mummy Pig entered the room and saw the postcard in Peppa's hands. Her face paled as she read the text. She knew these games weren't as fun as they seemed, and that children who went there sometimes never returned. Despite Mummy's warnings, Peppa decided to go to the games with George. They secretly snuck out of the house while their parents slept. The moon shone with cold light, and the wind whispered strange melodies through the tree leaves. The children arrived at a large clearing where other rabbits in pink jumpsuits awaited them. In the center stood a giant doll with empty eyes that slowly turned its head, watching every movement of the children. The main rabbit in a black mask announced the rules of the first game: red light, green light. But when someone moved on red light, a horrible creaking sound echoed, and that child disappeared into the darkness, leaving only the echo of their scream. Peppa realized she was trapped when she saw her friend Susie Sheep disappear. The doll's eyes glowed red, and the rabbits began slowly approaching the remaining children, making strange sounds like laughter and crying combined. George cried and hid behind Peppa when he realized the games hadn't ended as they expected. The rabbits surrounded them, their masks beginning to glow with an eerie pink light in the darkness, casting nightmarish shadows on the ground. At the last moment, Mummy and Daddy Pig appeared with flashlights, chasing the rabbits away. They hugged their children and led them home, explaining that not all invitations are safe, and that they should always listen to parents when they warn about danger. A sunny day illuminated Pig's house, but something was wrong. Peppa and George were playing in their room when they heard a strange sound from the basement. Mummy Pig was making breakfast, unaware of the danger. Daddy Pig was reading his newspaper, but his hands trembled with worry. Strange sounds from the basement became louder and more frightening. Peppa goes down the stairs into the dark basement, where she discovers a secret laboratory. George follows his sister, his eyes wide open with with fear. In the laboratory stand strange machines, and green liquids glow in flasks. Suddenly, a figure in a red and blue costume appears from the shadows. It's Spider-Man. He looks scared and points to a large black mass in the corner. Peppa and George hide behind a table, watching what's happening. The black mass begins to move and takes the shape of a terrifying creature. Venom slowly rises, his white eyes glowing in the darkness of the laboratory. Spider-Man tries to stop him, but Venom is too strong. Peppa screams in fear, drawing the monster's attention to herself. George hides behind his sister, trembling with horror. Venom approaches the children, his long tongue sticking out of his mouth. Spider-Man rushes to protect Peppa and George from danger. Mummy and Daddy Pig hear the screams and rush to the basement. They freeze in horror when they see what's happening in the laboratory. Spider-Man fights Venom, using his web and agility. The Pig family hides behind laboratory equipment, watching the battle. Venom roars and tries to grab Spider-Man with his tentacles. The laboratory shakes from their fight. Flasks fall and break. Peppa finds a red button on the wall and presses it. A bright light turns on, which blinds and weakens Venom. Spider-Man uses this moment to wrap the monster in web. George helps by throwing his toy dinosaur at Venom. Venom begins to weaken under the influence of bright light and web. Spider-Man ties him tighter, not letting him break free. The Pig family carefully comes out of hiding, still trembling. The laboratory gradually becomes quieter and safer. Spider-Man explains that Venom escaped from another laboratory. He thanks Peppa for helping with the light button. Daddy Pig calls a special service to take the monster away. Mummy Pig hugs the children, calming them after the scary adventure. Special agents arrive and take the tied-up Venom to a safe place. Spider-Man says goodbye to the family and flies away through the window. The laboratory is closed and sealed forever. The Pig family goes upstairs, leaving the nightmare behind. In the evening, the family sits in the living room, still shocked by the day's events. Peppa tells about her bravery in pressing the button. George is proud that he helped defeat the monster with his dinosaur. The parents promise never to keep secrets from the children again.